I'm Lou Jones. I'm a photographer, and I'm sure there are a number of other photographers in the room. I admit to being a photographer. It's the only thing I do, but my doctor told me that admission was the first direction in the cure. So I'm going to talk about Africa. I'm going to talk about Africa, and I was told to have you ask questions at the end so that they can edit. But I'm going to show you first, what we think Africa looks like. What the Western population, Europe, America, South America, think Africa looks like. We think of it in black and white. People go and think. They go on safaris. It's one of the most incredible places left on earth that has tremendous populations of animals, some of which are becoming quickly extinct. But people go there just to see the animals. They spend lots and lots of money. We think about AK-47s when we see the front pages of newspapers. AK-47, some kind of violence going on in Africa. People go and they pay to go on tours. Some of those people who are really adventurous pay and go on tours. And they see people in little villages, things like that, and they dance. They show you their traditional dances and all of that. And this is Tanzania. This is a village where they perform for tourists for a few dollars. But we also think of those sort of corrugated metal shacks, overpopulation, squalor. And this is the way we have thought about. But what I'm going to do, the last sort of, we think about Bedouins crossing the deserts, you know, with the sun setting in the background, with camels going across the Sahara. This is our vision, this is our image of the way Africa is being represented. But we're going to talk today about the other Africa, the Africa that I have discovered over the last few years. We're going to talk about education. This is in Addis Ababa, and that's the capital of Ethiopia. And this is graduation, of course. The lady in front with the red is getting her master's degree, and the man in back. There were thousands of people in this day. And we're going to talk about the marriage of the high technology that's going on, the research, the way they're using these incredible resources, sometimes even better than we are here in America and in Europe. And this is, of course, a wind farm. This was Morocco. I have a theory. My forefathers were pulled out of Africa and pulled to America as slaves. They were put to work on farms and to build America in the old days. And we've talked about this, you know, it's ad infinitum. But one of the things they brought over was music. Now, since they had broken away from their tribes, this amalgamation of the music was something that started maybe in the churches and on the farms, became church music, became gospel music, became blues, jazz, rock and roll, all came from, and now we have exported that music back to Africa. This is in a place called Burkina Faso. And they're playing the most incredible music all over Africa. It's really an incredible thing. We're seeing it, again, imported back this way, hopefully with them making a little money out of it this time. Medicine, healthcare is a real barometer of the nature of a country. Anywhere in the world, healthcare. So one of the things that we concentrate on is finding out what does that mean in each country, and it's a very, very, very different thing in each place. And of course, sports. You know, we see soccer. We see it. The Olympics is coming. Oh, it's the Winter Olympics, so maybe not so much people from Africa, although there will be some. There will be many. But we see that in the Summer Olympics. We see how incredibly advanced they are in all kinds of sports, running sports and events and things like that. Africans are really boxing. And as I said, technology. Technology is really an incredible place where even last month, National Geographic did a whole article based upon the fact of all these research centers that are going on in Africa and all the entrepreneurship that's coming out of them. This is Tanzania, school in Tanzania. Is Grace here? Anyway, Grace was supposed to be here. She was on this event. This is in Morocco. And this is an incredible company that's doing all kinds of agriculture. They're growing tomatoes, they're growing olives, and one of the big things they're doing is growing wine. And it's all organic. It's one of the biggest companies in all of Morocco. It's an enormously multi-billion-dollar. And this was in the northern part. Outside, it was 113 degrees where I was shooting, but inside we were photographing these casks where they were making red and white wine and things like that, all organically. 10 plus years ago, I read an article in, I think it was the New York Times, that upset me tremendously. It was the African Union claiming that they were going to censor Western access to the news. And you know, we grew up in a democracy, and that was like censorship was a four-letter word as we were growing up. So I thought, this is crazy. How can they keep the news out of the things that are going on? But their premise was that the news in Western, in Europe, Asia, and in Americas is always only three issues: poverty, pestilence, and conflict. So the PR about Africa was horrendous, and that's the image. So if you walk outside, walk down 33rd Street and talk to people about Africa, their image that we have implanted in their heads is basically negative. So the African Union was trying to say, wait a minute, we have to change this. We have to really change this. But I decided that I wanted to do something. I was a photographer. What could I do? What could I do in large and in a small way? Photography is a universal language. I don't need to take a course with the Rosetta Stone. I don't need to learn to speak French. I don't need to learn how to speak Swahili. I can take a picture and share it with the rest of the world. This is in Senegal, and I'm going to do a stupid thing because I should have made a map, but this is Africa. Big hump. Okay. Senegal is right there. The closest spot to America, closest western spot to America. America's over here. This is the first place I went. Years ago, I took this picture. And I realized in taking this picture, what has cascaded down for the years into my new life using photography to tell the story of Africa, that this was one of those times that was indelibly printed in my, this was fear. Fear is what a lot of people take Africa in general and what they think. Oh, what am I going to eat? Are people going to hit me in the head? Oh, I'm going to live out in the jungle like Tarzan and Jane. Oh, I had somebody actually ask me after I came back from Africa a couple of years ago, she said, is it hot? I was like, how do you answer a question? This is our image. Anyway, I was walking down the street to Senegal. I was walking down the street in northern Senegal by myself, cameras flopping all over the place. And I came upon this group of men, young men, all drinking beer and being loud and hitting each other and fist fighting and kicking and doing all kinds of young male things. And I saw this, and I went, oh, that's gorgeous. But I was too afraid, so I kept walking. I can't get involved in this. The violence that was being permeated there was just too much for me, so I kept going. And I got about 2 blocks, and I went, oh my God, this is early in my career. I'm going, oh, this is going to eat at me. I've got to go back. So I walked back with trepidation. I held my camera up. I don't speak Wolof, and they didn't speak any English. But I used the universal, hey, I got a camera, can I take your picture? And the guy kind of looked at me and said yes. I think he thought I was going to take his beautiful face. I don't even remember what he looked like. But the idea is that we have to take this fear as a photographer and move through the world. Then the next country I went to was Egypt. And this was an assignment. So I was over in Egypt photographing. It was wonderful, They wanted pictures of the pyramids. They wanted pictures of all kinds, they wanted pictures of the Nile. They wanted pictures, the typical stuff, which I did. But I was trying to discover what Egypt really looked like, and so I did a couple of very, very strange things. But anyway, this was a photograph I took within a book that I published called a travel photography book. And I took it and I used it in the chapter that talked about exactly what so many people who go to these exotic places or have fear and don't go to these exotic places, language. It was a chapter on language. You see that it's in a completely different, completely unreadable to me. It was so unreadable that I had to, because I put it in the book, so I said, I really ought to check out and find out what this says, because it could be, down with all Americans, or, kill Whitey or something like that kind of thing. So I actually sent it away to somebody. It's a doctor's office. 4.5 years ago, I got on a plane, got off. I used my map again. I got off in Ghana, chosen for a very specific reason, but I got off in Ghana, which is a country that is very close to America and has a very, very big presence in our colleges, and people study it. It's very, very friendly to Americans. But I got off having no idea if this crazy idea of photographing 54 countries in Africa, trying to do contemporary Africa, to come and disrupt the way we have been seeing things, so that we were looking at contemporary Africa and all of its glory. I had no idea if it could be done. No idea. I've been working on it for years, and every time I got close, I would come upon something that would become a hurdle, fear, another hurdle that would prevent me. And so it wasn't until social media became really, really useful, that I realized that I could at least try. And so I got off in Ghana, and this is That's the Atlantic Ocean. That's amazing, amazing. These were places that they literally pulled Africans out and sailed over those waters and brought them to America 400 or 500 years ago. So, what was I looking for? Contemporary Africa. I could go to those places that all the tourists and jumping and dancing Africans. But what I was trying to do was to distill a country into a way that I could photograph and see if I could get to those places. And so a big part of it is industry. Industry. So one of the big industries there, of course, is fishing. And this was as far as the eye could see. This was just, when I came around the corner and saw this, it was just like, you know, more people than I've ever seen. And this goes literally so far into the distance that I couldn't see the end of it. It was just tens of thousands of people. But anyway, it creates the kind of thing that we were looking for to show what people look differently. At the same time, I had to, again, use my Western brain to distill certain things that we use as cliches, one of which is, to use a very politically incorrect term, of tribes. What does that mean? We don't use that term so much in the United States, because each of these countries, this is Africa. We can identify the Senegals, the Ghanas, the South Africas, the Egypts. We can identify all those places, but that's a complete Western construct. These countries didn't exist a few hundred years ago. The tribes and where they are, so that often the countries that we visit and we claim very often split tribes in the middle, so that they're amazingly broken up families and tribes and generations of culture because of the colonial thing. So how do we do that? Well, I'm dealing with it by country, but in point of fact, we're going, and where's Michael? There's Michael sitting there. Michael works in my studio. Michael does all of this. Michael keeps track of all this stuff in the studio. And so Michael is trying to, eventually, we're going to create a map that's just tribal lines. We've been working on that for a while now, so that we can sort of mirror them on top of each other. And this is up in the northern part of Ghana. This is Kumasi. It's this town up there. And these, maybe you've heard of it, Ashanti. Does anybody have heard of Ashanti? They're the people that make the wonderful weavings that you see people wearing around their neck and things like that. Amazing textiles. But I followed all the way. And these are Ashanti women. And we want to show that people do the same kinds of things, are interested in the same kinds of things that we are here in the United States. This is a jazz club. Jazz club's been there for 30 years. It's famous. You have to know somebody to be able to find it. This is the middle of, just on the outskirts of Accra, which is the capital. That's one of the things that's really weird about this. You get those Jeopardy questions, start to know the capitals of all the countries in Africa, which is a really strange thing. But Accra. And so, and the music was just outstanding, just outstanding. But these are the kinds of things we're going and having people tell us where to go, what to see, how to find these things. And we talked, I said, about health. And I bumped on dirt roads for 2 days in the back seat of one of those pickup trucks that doesn't have a back seat. And I was in the back. My knees were in such pain for 2 days. I bumped to get to this community hospital. This fellow runs this hospital. One doctor, several nurses, but they're administering to mostly Ashanti people in the northern part. But this is the kind of thing. Sometimes the pictures come easy, sometimes not so much. Then the next trip, the algorithm that we choose, where do we go next, is very complex. It started out being sort of one of those, being not so smart. I actually have a fraternity brother who went to college with me here. It's wonderful. He came down from upstate New York. So he knows that I'm not very smart. He's one of the smart ones that went to school with me. But the algorithm, we used those words, didn't we? Algorithm was kind of words we used back in those days. The algorithm that we use to choose where we go next is very complex. This is Tanzania. Now, Ghana is on the Atlantic. Tanzania is way over in the eastern part. This is considered West Africa. This is East Africa, of course. It makes sense, but it's very, very specific, and the people really identify with their regions as well as their countries. And so it's on the Indian Ocean. And the Indian Ocean was explored long before the Atlantic ever was. So the Indian Ocean, they're on the Indian Ocean, and of course fishing is a big, big, big deal there. But we went to, and that algorithm has to do with time of year, seasons, rain, if there are any events that are going on that we have to be aware of, that we want to include. So this is Tanzania. This was the second big country that we went to. And getting into convincing school systems to let us in and photograph in classrooms and things like that. This is a math class in the middle, dead middle of. Has anybody been to Ngorongoro crater? Has anybody here? You have? Yeah. This gentleman? Yeah. So you know exactly where this is. This is right next to the Ngorongoro crater. So. I'll talk a little bit about the strange components that not only do we have to worry about these algorithms of when we go where, not only, but the algorithm also had to do with where we went last. So we're trying to dot around rather than concentrating on one part or taking just the famous countries that we know about. We're trying to take a big country, a little country, a famous country, a not so famous country, a country that's in the news, a place you've never heard of. In order to be sure that we give sort of equal as we go along and promote these places. But this is another word that we use, we have trouble with, agriculture. Now again, a lot somebody help me with, is agrarian, is that a word? Agrarian, it does mean sort of agriculture, kind of like. The agrarian part of Africa is really very significant, not only in its traditions, but also in the agribusiness, these huge farms that are being bought up by outside sources, the Chinese, the Americans, there are all kinds of, so we want to be sure that we include agriculture, and this is a farm growing, but one of the things I want to talk about is that these words, we go and people say, what do you want to photograph? What do you want to see? What do you want to do? So we go, and especially when you're applying for grants and things, they say, you've got to tell people exactly what you're going to photograph before you ever see it, which I don't get. But, so we put down, agriculture, and these again are Western constructs. So when we talk about agriculture amongst us, it's very different. So we're having to find more enlightened vocabulary. I, as a schmuck little photographer, have to find a more enlightened way to talk about these issues. So if anybody in here has any experience with doing that, I would really appreciate the help. Not only am I just showing you what we're doing, I'm hoping to enlist some of the help from people here to let us know, to tell us about people they know there, to tell us about issues that really wonderful things, the maps, the different the people that know medical things. So one of the things is to see if we can't nuance our language, which we're having a lot of problems with. But we have to list them. So far, we're having still to list a lot of the things the way we do in academia, which is problematic. That island, that's Tanzania. Right off the coast of Tanzania, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, is an island called Zanzibar. Anybody heard of that?
Yeah.
What's that?
That's the Zan part.
That's exactly. When I was this big, this country was called Tanganyika. And at some point, because it incorporated Zanzibar, it's now called Tanzania. And so this is Zanzibar, and this is extremely Muslim country. It's a small, small island. You could almost walk across it. It's an amazing, amazing place. It's been, it's used in all of the Sydney Green Street black and white film noirs as a place where pirates back in the day, But it's an amazing place, and its big claim to fame now is it's where Freddie Mercury was born. So they have Freddie Mercury. Anybody know Freddie Mercury from Queen? Okay, all right. So that's everywhere. It's everywhere. But the population is very different from Tanzania, from the mainland, and so you get to this amazing way that women walk around dressed. And again, it's very well known for having one of the more well-known tribes, which is the Maasai. The Maasai are kind of, again, a cliche. They're tall, thin. They're amazing. They are nomadic, so they move their cattle. And I chased the camels. I chased down, chased them down the hill. And they just kept going, and I think I kept losing ground, and so I got back in the car and drove around the corner. I did not, and then there were zillions of them. So I got back out and photographed the pictures. But the Maasai, very suspicious of cameras and very suspicious of photography and things like that. But they're wonderful, and they walk everywhere. So there's very few in their villages, and this is an amazing part of what we're doing. Again, the discovery is that there are these two parallel contemporary things going on in Africa. One is being dressed like this, going to work in offices downtown, driving cars, owning homes, having the Gap, and having Macy's, and having McDonald's, and all of this in the urban places and many of the smaller cities. And all of this just looks just like downtown Manhattan. Well, maybe not Manhattan, but downtown Boston, downtown Cleveland. So it looks just like, the same kind of traffic problems and everything like that. But at the same time, there are these tribal situations where there are these communities that are in direct parallel. And we in America think of them as, well, if they had some more money, if they had some more education, they want to be just like us. And that's just not the case. They are preserving a culture, and they're doing it on purpose, and they're holding at arm's length the advances. So these people, like I said, are still walking. So they'll walk miles and miles to go to school. They'll walk miles and miles and miles to go to the hospital. They'll go walk to visit each other. It's really an amazing thing. So we see this sort of contemporary thing. So they're living in these structures. They're called bomas. They're living there. There's no running water. There's no electricity. They're living completely off the grid in terms of what we consider contemporary life. And they want to. That's what's so, the only thing is they all have cell phones. So you'll see the Maasai stand, I'm going to see if I can do this, standing there like on one leg. You know, it's very typical of them. For some reason, they stand like that with the sticks. This is for sticks for their cattle. Talking on a phone, talking on a cell phone. It's really pretty amazing. Everybody has one. It's really a technology. And then, Michael, this was yesterday, wasn't it, Michael? That we talked about landmarks? Yes. Okay, this is Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro, you know, people who go to Africa say, I'm going to, on my here she comes, on my bucket list, exactly, bucket list, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. They could care less about Africa. They want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and there it is. And this was the situation in Tanzania. It's the tallest, highest mountain so we're having to find these kinds of things where we're looking at these landmarks, these things that make, you know, somebody said that cliches are cliches because they're good. You know, people want to see the Eiffel Tower because it's cool. So Kilimanjaro. So we went, I got up, I hired a guy to take me for hours of driving to get to Kilimanjaro, and I did all of the due diligence. You know, I studied what the weather was going to be like. Pure blue skies, sunny. By the time we got there, it was socked in. You couldn't see your hand in front of you. We got some wonderful pictures of the villages that are at the base. No pictures of Kilimanjaro. So of course, on the way back, I kept seeing that the Red Sea was parting. Those clouds were moving out, and this was the best picture I got of Mount Kilimanjaro. But this is important. These are important landmarks. Then we went to Swaziland. And Swaziland is a small, small country in the southern part of Africa. You see how we're going around like this. Swaziland, and it's a country, and it's completely surrounded by South Africa. And it was successful, had a wonderful run for years and years. This is a horrible thing to say, because of apartheid. And the reason was because of its unique makeup. Swaziland settled with South Africa to not be touched because South Africa, because of apartheid, was fighting so many conflicts all around it by all the other countries, by all the other tribes, that Swaziland said, they said to Swaziland, if you do not help any of our enemies, we will let you do exactly what you want. So you could go to Swaziland and you could gamble, you could cohabitate with people of other colors, you could do all kinds of things. So Swaziland really thrived in that environment because, and they still have casinos and things like that. But it's really pretty amazing place. And so again, we're chasing things like industry. This was glass blowing. They were making these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things where we were able to get into 2 hospitals. And one of them was specifically founded to deal with HIV. I think she's getting diphtheria for just what babies get when they're in the early few weeks of their lives and stuff like that, few months. But we met with a young girl and we photographed. It was really wonderful. I think she was 16. She had juvenile HIV, and they're claiming, because of the success with the medicines and the treatment they're doing, they're saying that within the next decade or so, they may be able to eradicate juvenile HIV, which is really advances. So they're making progress with the kinds of things. But again, medicine, which is a really big thing with us. And this is Swazi wire. The people in Swaziland claim that they're all related, that they're all one tribe. It's really pretty interesting. So they all claim to be Swazi. It's a slightly different word, but they all claim to be Swazi. But this is Swazi wire, and they make extruded iron, steel, and they make fences. And the owner talked a lot about security and how people prevent things, how security conscious everybody is, but he made fences to ensure their security. But this was lit. This is all, a lot of what we do. We carry a lot of equipment. Actually, Grace came in, right? Where is she?
Right here.
There she is, okay. Hi, you. We were talking about you earlier, bad too. This was lit. We take a lot of lighting equipment. It's everything we do is for those photographers that are interested in this kind of thing, especially a photojournalist. We carry heavy, but we've reduced everything down to smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller things. We really, I weigh tenths of an ounce. Getting on airplanes and paying for that extra weight and everything has really become a problem. And then moving around with the small crews that we have. So this is all lit. We use speed lights. We use Nikon, and we use Nikon speed lights and everything like that. So this is available light, and this is, again, it's the industry. This is kind of thing where we have, and women's collectives. We found that that's become a really huge component of the economy, where women, because they have been marginalized, there's a word, the word in Swahili for woman is water, because they carry water on their heads every day. It's such an enormous part, so that they're called water. But because they've been marginalized throughout history, they've started to form these collectives, and they're making these. This is an enormous carpet rug that they're working on here. It's all by hand, all those kind of things like that. And of course, we come back again to religion. This is, and don't throw things yet. I've got an excuse. These are Zionists. There's a town in Ohio called Zion, and the Protestant missionaries imported this religion that they call Zionism to Swaziland, and almost the entire population of Swaziland is Zionist. Yeah. But I didn't see you over there. So anyway, so they allowed us to come in and photograph all day long in their church. It's really, it was just unbelievable. It took us almost the entire time we were in Swaziland to get permission. But finally the pastor allowed us in, and then we were there for about 2/3 of the day, and it was like, it was just unbelievable. But it was, and we sort of tried to get up and sneak out the back door, and the pastor said, no, we haven't spoken in tongues yet. And that's what this is. So they're all speaking in some language that I'm not even sure they understand, but they were all. Then we moved from here to here, just 500 miles, to Lesotho, which is a country, again, landlocked. Now this was my claim to fame here in Lesotho is, does anybody watch Jeopardy? Well, couple of weeks ago, they had Championship Jeopardy, you know, the big thing. And one of the questions during Championship Jeopardy, Final Jeopardy, I knew the answer before they asked the question because I've been there. So Lesotho was the answer. But this is herd boys. Again, a completely different culture. These people are nomadic, similar to the Maasai, but all of this is done by young boys, young men who are herding things, living with these animals out in the middle of nowhere by themselves. And they use these beautiful blankets, they call them in English. And the blankets, you know, tell you where they're from, what section of the what tribe they're in, what part of the country they're in, by the kind of blanket and what the. But anyway, they deal with animals. They herd animals. They call herd boys, and they're really very isolated, very often uneducated, never go to school. And this is that parallel universe. And this is a traditional doctor. This is somebody who has studied very extensively traditional herbs and become an herbologist and a psychologist about treatment of people that without contemporary medicines and things like that. And she was very reticent to let us in, but what I did was I paid for a session. So this gentleman is being treated, and she was very open once we made sure that she wasn't losing money for the time she was with us. But this is traditional. And in Lesotho, traditional medicine is much more important than contemporary medicine. So they will go to a traditional doctor long before they'll go into a hospital. It's really very Lesotho, as I said, is way down here. It's way up high in the mountains. It's the only place in Africa that has a ski resort. It's so high up in the mountains. It's got snow-capped mountains. And because of that, because of the incredible nature, they have lots of rain. So they have lots of water. And water is an incredible. So this is inside a dam. So they're able to survive because a lot of their income is based upon selling the water to South Africa. They were getting so much water, so they're building dams and things like that. This is inside a dam. And schools. We have to pay for this stuff. It's very hard to do that. Paying for this stuff. Every country costs money. Every time we go out, it costs us money. So one of the things that we've done, and Deborah, who asked me to talk about how we've used crowdfunding. So we've used Kickstarter and things like that to raise money. So we go out. One of the things that's really become so complex in today's world, where artists are looking to find grants and things like that, and that money is drying up, all of a sudden we have social media, and you can go out and find people all over the world who might send you a few dollars, a few $100s, and things like that to say, I'm interested in this project. So we've actually used Kickstarter to fund three of the countries that we've gone to. So this is a thing. But this is a school in Lesotho that we were allowed into, and a lot of this is paid for. These are the herd boys again. This is what they look like when they're they came down out of the mountains in order to buy supplies. So the stuff that they're packing on the back, they're taking back. This is their food and other things that they need. But this is the herd boys. We literally took a time, and people said that there was a city, there was a town in Lesotho that had everybody riding around on these donkeys as if it was the Old West, just like the, John Wayne and all of that. They said you can go there and everybody's riding around on these horses and things like that. It's really quite, so we went there and of course nothing, nobody was riding anything. And so we were driving back and we found this, we passing out of the corner of my eye, I happened to see these, so I jumped out and engaged them in very bad conversation. But Namibia, again, back on the Atlantic coast. Namibia was part of South Africa. So Namibia, very differently from Swaziland, had all of the same problems that South Africa with apartheid. But this is a Namibian pilot, and I worked for 4 weeks to get permission to photograph at the airport. But anyway, this is a pilot, and I talked to him almost every day for 2 weeks at least. And he kept saying, yeah, it'll happen. And I thought, it was just a couple of days before I left. And I thought that they were going to just blow me off. But finally he said, come on in. And not only was I able to photograph him at the airport with the airplanes in the background, but he says, you don't want to photograph in the cockpit? And I was like, oh my God, of course, So this is lit. We lit this, have the speed lights on the extreme left-hand side and things like that. But and I'm crouched in the pilot seat, or the co-pilot seat, I guess, and photograph. This is a 737. This is Air Namibia. This is a big plane. It's a big plane, and they're allowing. In the United States, it would be crazy to get inside an airplane like this. The other side of the spectrum, from that kind of skill, that kind of ability, to this kind of the craftsmanship, the kind of look at the incredible things this man has carved. This is all wood, entire elephants and all masks, and he does all this by hand. And this is passed down generation to generation. So we're dealing with these again parallel. And this is one of the tribes. And we were able to travel way up north. This is a Herero, which is, and they dress like this Victorian garb all the time. They're always in this incredibly huge skirts, and the headdresses are all sort of imply that they own cattle. This is supposed to be the horns of cows, and they're cow owners. They have herds, but this is literally in the middle of nowhere. There's not a speck of electricity or newspaper, or there's no cell phone service, nothing there. And we slept with them for, that's not the right word. We stayed with them in little huts like this is dung, this entire thing. When we got to her little village, she was elbow deep in dung. It was quite pungent. And they build, and that stuff's like concrete. And so we slept in the little houses like that. But she's curdling milk to get, I guess, cheese or whatever you curdle. So she's swinging it back and forth in these gourds, and that's what she's doing. But again, the fellow that brought us to her was her grown son, who works in Windhoek, which is the capital of Namibia. He works there as a contemporary. He wears suits every day and everything, but he took us all the way back to where he grew up. And this is his mother. And he goes almost every weekend, drives hundreds of miles in order to see his family. But they're maintaining this incredible culture while he's going off and has gotten an education, has gotten a job, a big deal. So there's this dichotomy going on. And everything we do, or almost everything we do, is 6 degrees of separation. Where we have, when I first started, I thought I was going to make this whole thing work by going to NGOs and getting NGOs to support my efforts. And then I realized literally in the first week that I was in Ghana, the first country, that this was really fraught with peril. I realized I'm not going to use that word, sorry. The problems that created. NGOs basically have an agenda. They want to sell them a machine. They want to convince them to use a new grain. They want to convince them to clarify a certain medicine so that they can do studies on it. There's an agenda. Most often those agendas are fairly well founded, but it's a Western agenda. So after just the first week in the first country, I realized I couldn't use NGOs. I had to completely separate myself in order to make sure that I was always using local people to tell me what was important, to tell me what the traditions were, to show me the old and the new, which was really problematic. Just before I went to Namibia, I met this person at a party, and they said, "Oh, I went to school with a woman who married a Namibian man, and he teaches at the university." I was like, "Oh my God, this is incredible." And he introduced us. He had been one of the freedom fighters 25 years ago when they were fighting for their independence. And all of the people that he knew at the time have now gone on to become prominent people, and he happened to, one of his best friends was the publisher of the Namibian. So that's how we got, he wasn't all that happy in letting us come in and photograph him, but then he let us photograph in the, but it was the 25th anniversary. This is total kismet, just the 25th anniversary of the newspaper. So I photographed, they started at midnight printing the paper, and we went to early in the morning and they printed paper. So when I got back home, I went on and I started to look at the pictures, and I went, oh man, and I sent the publisher maybe half a dozen photographs, and he liked them so much that they printed some of the pictures in the 25th anniversary issue. So this is our currency. We can't pay people to get access to the hospitals and the schools and the businesses and things. We don't have that kind of money, even if even if it was legitimate. We don't, so our currency is photographs. So we were able to give back. We do that with a lot of places, the hospitals and places like that. We all send them photographs and things like that. As I said, Namibia was part of South Africa, so they had the same difficulties. You can go in South Africa today and drive down the road, and on one side of the road is manicured green lawns with beautiful trees and picket fences and white church chapels and nice houses. And literally on the other side of the road, you get the townships that you've heard about in South Africa, which are the tin shacks that at sunset, the black Africans had to be out of the main parts of the city and back to these townships. So they had to, so literally at sunset, otherwise something very, very dire could happen to them. So that these townships have grown up literally across the street. And it's not just one or two, it's not just the Sowetos and that we've all heard about. I'm talking about dozens and dozens, probably hundreds of them in South Africa. And this is one of the townships in Namibia. And it is because it's 25 years of independence, 25 years of prosperity. They've been able to build up. So this is a bar in the township in Windhoek, which is the capital, as I said. And this is, well, like I said, this is a bar. But now it's thriving. It's got businesses. This is a bar, but it's got all kinds of businesses and things like that. And people are socializing and restaurants and places to eat and community centers and markets and things like that. So it really has been an incredible change. Ethiopia. Ethiopia is here. Ethiopia claims to never having been colonized. The only country in Africa that wasn't colonized. Isn't that incredible? One country in all of these places. And Ethiopia has a history that goes back, it's biblical. Abyssinia. So it has a history that goes way, 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 way back. And so they're very proud of this. And so this is a biotechnology concerns. They consider it the largest one in all of Africa, where this is sugarcane. And so rather than, what do we call it, HMOs? GMOs, where we're altering, they're just using environments that are completely sterilizing to keep the parasites and the things out of and growing, and so they get these incredible yields. But it's all very healthy and very, very interesting how they're really starting to feed people with in better ways. And this was inside. Lumberjacks. Wood is an incredible property in the world in general. But we see we've moved away from it. We go, oh, this is nice imitation wood, but they are using wood. They use it for fuel. They use it for building. They use it for making all kinds of things. They strip the bark. They use it for food. So wood has become a really important thing. I have a client in the western part of the United States that's really taught me a lot about how wood is used and how it has been used throughout history, museums. So we're chasing the painters and the artists and seeing how they've mastered the kind of beautiful things that are coming out of. This is the largest market in all of Africa, outdoor market. And in Ethiopia, I've heard about it for years and years and years, and so I went and found it. And this is people winnowing again. They're using very, very old methods. This is spice market. This is the spice part of the market. And at the other end of the spectrum, this is people assembling trucks. And again, this one was a kind of a weird story in that we wanted to chase some of the very well-known tribes in Ethiopia. So we went out west, went to the eastern part of the country near Djibouti, and we chased down, we had to get out of the car and walk for miles and miles and miles. They were so far removed, and we got thrown out of so many different villages. It was really, really, really horrible. And they would say, no, you can't come in, you can't photograph. So we were really didn't know what to do. And we went back to the town and found somebody who had written a book on his tribe. And he took us to this and these. So we went and we walked for a mile. We got out of the car. We had to push the car through streams up, it was, classic kind of, because they're so far removed. And they finally let us, and they said, oh, okay. And they said, we'll have to talk it over with the council. And so we walked and walked and walked and walked and walked and walked, and more people from out of where they came from, there was no hiding place, no place they could have, but they just, and by the time we got close to this little village, we must have had 24 men, and we all hunkered down, something we don't do well, but we all hunkered down, and I didn't know. I said, well, when are they going to start talking about, when are they going to start discussing us? When are they going to give us permission or not give us permission? They just kept milling around, and they would say, and they'd nod to us and shake our hand and everything like that. And then finally they just all stood up and walked toward the village, and my guide, who said, they gave you permission, go ahead. And so, but it was one of those classic beautiful ceremonies where you don't know. They're all gathered and stooped down, and they're discussing somehow. I don't know whether they were just using mental telepathy. I didn't see anybody really, but they gave us permission, and this is what we got out of it. Does anybody know what a monolith is? You do?
I think I do. It's a big stone.
It's a big stone, yes. I didn't know what it was until I got here, and it's a big, big stone where they carve churches out of. So this is one piece of rock that goes up 30, 40 feet. They've carved out rooms and everything out of solid rock, and they're monolithic. There's monolithic churches all over this one little town in Egypt. Not Egypt, sorry, Ethiopia. And they claim to have Jewish, Islamic, and Christians all getting along in the same, and this is Christian, of course. This is one of the big, very famous area, very, very famous area. 15th century, something like that, and these are icons. But the whole thing is they claim to get, a few years ago, somebody help me here, I believe they found Ethiopian Jews that went to Israel, and this is where they came from, and they're very proud of this fact that they are able to get along pretty much. Burkina Faso, little place right here, again landlocked. And Burkina Faso is a really small little country, just above Ghana. And it has this amazing movie film festival. So we had to, and it's every 2 years, so we had to, talk about that algorithm of choosing. So it had popped up long before this, and we had to wait 2 years for it to come around to go back so that we were there for the film festival. And this is a dance studio. This woman is a choreographer, and she actually brought her dance company to the Atlanta Olympics, and this is in the dance studio. And if anybody can see how I hid myself so that you can't see myself, this is all lit. We lit this, but I'm either dressed and dancing with them, or I'm hiding somehow. But this is a dance studio. It was really wonderful. She told a great story. Again, to the point that we made in the very beginning, she told the story about how she was invited to the Atlanta, to bring her company to the Atlanta Olympics. And she said, okay, I'll do it, but only if you send some emissaries to see what we do and how we do it here in Africa. So she picked them up at the airport, and they had 6 trunks with them. They were there for 3 or 4 days, but they had 6 trunks with them. And she says, what did you, she said, they said, it's full of water. They were so afraid that they weren't going to be able to drink the water, so they brought their own. And she said, she took them to the supermarket and said, here's all the water you need. It was silly. So this is the kind of conceptions that we have of Africa, but anyway. But we're talking again, we'll sort of round it out to talk about language and not speaking, and language being a way of we communicate, and how photography is universal language. But even with photography being a universal language, we use the same words. When we understand the words The words don't mean the same things to us. How does that work? How does that, when I used to go to Japan every year, we would be talking back and forth, and I would realize after several minutes that we were not talking about anything close to the same thing. But here, I got in and I said, we were in, here's another Jeopardy. The capital of Burkina Faso is, what's that? Ouagadougou. Very good Jeopardy question. Ouagadougou. All right. There you go. So anyway, we were in Ouagadougou, and we've been there for a few days, and I'm saying we've got to get outside. We've got to go visit people. What else can we go? Can we get to other farms and other people making it? I said, is another place that we really need to visit? Is there a good place to go that really would reflect the country? And everybody's, you got to go to Bobo. Bobo. Okay, yeah, you got to go Bobo. Bobo's beautiful. Bobo is the art center of Burkina Faso. They said you have to go to Bobo. It's really a beautiful city. It's great, it's where all the artists are, where they're just doing it, and it's much nicer than Ouaga, as they call it. So Bobo, so I found out that Bobo is Bobo-Dioulasso. So it's Bobo-Dioulasso. So, okay, let's go to Bobo. Let's go there. I said, here's where all of this stuff fails. I said, how far is Bobo? And they three of them looked up, sort of said, it's 6 hours. So now, my degrees were in physics, so using 6 hours as a measure of how far something is away is Einsteinian relativity. But I thought, that's very practical, Bobo is 6 hours away. That's doable. That's easy. We can get there. We can go to Bobo. That's very, very good. I said, and when I asked a couple more questions, I said, which direction? Silence. You just go toward Bobo. Okay. Go toward 6 hours. Go toward Bobo. Yeah. We know. It's easy. It's on the highway, and then you get off the highway, and then you go over to and they go. I said, north, south, east, west. Grown, college educated, no clue. So I said, this problem of language, this problem of understanding, this problem of communication between places, this gets more and more complicated. They had no idea. They didn't use that. Again, a Western construct. So I'm just like, So now, being the doofus that I am, when I got back home, I looked it up on Google. But, we got to Bobo-Dioulasso. And that's what it looks like. It's an amazing place where they have, like I said, we photographed another dance company there. We photographed some artists there. We photographed, it was really, really wonderful. And it has this amazing Sahel architecture, which is, the Sahel is a band that goes through the middle of West Africa, and it's in Mali. You see it in Côte d'Ivoire, and anyway, this is and the imam took us all around this temple, took us inside, and then Grace, stand up, Grace. This is Grace. Grace, you're third year?
In college?
Yes.
Second year.
In
NYU.
NYU in photo.
Yes, going into photography.
Yes. So Grace was my assistant on this trip. So this was done in July, right?
Yes, June and July.
Yeah, June and July. And so Grace was the beast of burden for this project. And so this is a tremendous accomplishment, getting into the hospital in Marrakesh. Huge hospital. They allowed us in the oncology department. They allowed us in pediatrics. They actually allowed me to photograph people getting their cancer, what do you call that? Chemotherapy. Oh, it's unbelievable. Just rows and rows of people, all with this chemotherapy, undergoing chemotherapy and stuff like that. They allowed me access, and I think we were there for a day and a half. We were supposed to be there for 2 days, but we kind of ran out the back door, and I think they got very, very mad at us for not photographing for the whole 2 days. But this was so they finally said, we were all over and they said, don't you want to go into the operating rooms? I was like, is that a possibility? And so they let us, I photographed in several operating rooms but I was so intrigued with the way the nurses are in hijabs, and they're all the nurses are wearing the hijabs just as if it was, it's just as if it's a uniform, just like we have instead of the normal thing. It's really quite beautiful. But they allowed me, and it was I was in one, and they had the guy cut from here to here. And I went around, and I'm shooting, and I'm getting closer and closer and closer, and I'm shooting, and the surgeon turns to me, and he goes, and I go closer and closer, and he says, look down. So I'm looking in, literally, guy's entire side, left side was open, just a hole this big. And he goes, look, and I go, oh. Like boom, boom. He says, "Look!" He nods at his one of his helpers, and he said, "Okay," and nod to him. And all of a sudden, you see this, and the lung just completely filled and completely filled the cavity and stuff like that. It was really quite, you're a photographer, but the ability to be in these kinds of experiences where you're seeing things that most people never get to see, but they were really quite generous with us. And this is a picture I took 20 years to finally get. This is in Fez, in Morocco, and this is dyes. They're dyeing leather. It's a very big product that comes out of Morocco. They have lots and lots of leather things they call them babouches, those pointed no back shoes. They wear all kinds of things that are made of leather, and it's all done in these. This stuff has got to be horrible for you, but they're literally chest deep in these tubs, dyeing these hides and things like that. But I've heard about it for years and years and years. And they give you a sprig of eucalyptus or something like that. Has anybody seen this? Has anybody been to Yeah, I've seen people nodding. Yeah, you've been there? Oh yeah. Okay. So, am I telling it right?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. And but it took me 20 years to get. To take this picture. I've been wanting to take this picture for a long finding.
Where are you standing? Where are you?
There is, it's a whole community in the middle of Fez, very well known. Every tour bus, the tour buses just line up and but what happens is that they have the markets, multiple story markets have grown up around it so that you can go in through the store, and they don't even, they see you coming and they just go that way, you go up the stairs. It's, and the Americans go, oh, it stinks, because leather is not, curing leather is not a attractive thing. But anyway, so that, yes, and they take you right to the railing and you can photograph to your heart's content. And it's big. It's big. I was interested in the music, so I was this musical group, as you see, that's in the background, was really what I was there for. We photographed 2 musical groups that were in this club. This is, again, I think this is in Fez, isn't it?
Yes, Fez.
Yeah. That's actually that's Grace.
Hi, Grace.
So we photographed in this club, and we waited forever for the club to get more people, and we had to sort of go up and scout people up and put them in the room, you know. But they were, but if you notice, again, we're lighting this situation, and you can actually see the light. Not only are we carrying speed lights, but we're using those little, you can get them downstairs, I'm sure, those little Lumidynes. Anybody ever seen those things? They're little teeny about that. And everybody in my crew has one in their pocket, so that if I need another one, they all have, you know, so she's literally lighting this lady in the club. A LumaCube, L-U-M-E. Yeah, have you seen them? Yeah, they're beautiful, beautiful. Everybody has one. So if you need really fast light, really, you know, you need something in some places they don't have any electricity, and they're pitch dark, you know, they're sewing in these incredibly dark places, you know. So you need, for photography, you just need a little wink of light. Those little, you can dial them down to just a little bit and put them on the side, kind of things like that. Yeah. And this is the last one. This is Casablanca. So we photographed in Casablanca. Of course, it's the largest. I believe it's the largest city in Morocco. It's an amazing, amazing place. But this is. That's it.